Nerdrotic.com.
Welcome back to Nerdrotic. My name is Gary Beekler, and I come to you from Nerdrotic.com, and this is going to be my quick one-take, spoiler-free, and then there'll be a little spoiler section at the end, review of Spider-Man Far From Great. Yes, I might be in the minority on this one, but I thought it was okay. It's an improvement on Homecoming, which I think is one of the worst MCU films out there. And I just got home, turned on my camera, sat my butt down. I went with Nerdrotic Jr. We wore matching shirts. He feels the same way I feel about the film. He gave it a 5 out of 10. There are elements he thoroughly dislikes, especially the MJ thing, which I thoroughly dislike. Zenyatta Mondatta, I know that's not her name, but it's a good Police album, did a pretty good job in this as the hashtag not my MJ. And everything was improved. Tom Holland felt like more the Tom Holland from Civil War that I liked. He cried a lot less, which was really good. But the unfortunate thing is you guys aren't seeing Spider-Man, Marvel Spider-Man. This is Disney's Spider-Man. And I know you felt like you've seen a lot of Spider-Man films. And you've seen a lot of versions of Spider-Man. The closest to the comics being the Sam Raimi Spider-Man from Spider-Man 2, which is the best, one of the best comic book movies ever made, and definitely the best Spider-Man movie ever made. This is not the worst, nor is it the best. I would put this in the lower tier of MCU films. Definitely enjoyable. Go see it for a matinee price. Save your money. Don't be paying $50 for two people. Or I don't know what it is in your town. I'm in San Francisco. Everything's expensive here. It's like being in Europe. So it was kind of boring in parts. The high school lovey-dovey stuff was cute and entertaining for like a minute, but then it gets old. Jon Favreau, as happy, is decent in it, but there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't land. That, this is the end of phase 3. We're supposed to have still the emotional impact of the events of Endgame, and honestly, I think they missed the ball on a lot of them. They kind of make a joke out of one. There is one fantastic thing that happens that I'll get to you in the spoiler section if you want to hang out. If not, then just wait for it. There's one freaking a couple awesome things that happen. But mostly, it's just a pretty good movie. I'm not completely down on it. I would give it a 7 out of 10. A 7 out of 10. Tom Holland is good. But again, you're not seeing the real Spider-Man, and I don't think you'll ever will. You're seeing Spider-Boy, assisted to Tony Stark, the next Iron Man. And that's the thing Nerdrotic Jr. hates the most. But overall, it's a fun but forgettable film. And the most interesting thing to me, now, listen, this movie's going to make all the money. It's going to make tons of money. But I was in an empty theater. Again, it was just slightly more filled than it was for Dark Phoenix. Now, am I saying it's going to do Dark Phoenix numbers? Hell no. This thing's going to be a hit, okay? Don't get me wrong. And maybe there's just too many screens. But I went to a 12:30 p.m. showing here on the Pacific Time. We're in summer. Everybody's out of school. And, yes, it was the more expensive theater where you pick seats, but it was empty. There was no cheering. I was the only one who cheered during one scene. Spider-Man being in Europe, I don't know if this was a wise decision to do. I understand it, but you're trying to establish Spider-Man in the MCU, and Spider-Man needs to be swinging around New York. He just needs to be swinging around New York, not Venice and Prague. I mean, it was great, and I bet you shooting on location was awesome. The director did a much better job this time than he did last time. Jake Gyllenhaal or Jake Gyllenhaal, I don't know how to say his name and I don't care, was pretty good as Mysterio, but overly stoic at times. And, well, I'll talk about it in the spoiler section. Jon Favreau was pretty good, but everybody was just kind of there. I don't know how much of an impact this truly has on the MCU. It just felt like an epilogue, and I hear a lot of people talking about this being a great epilogue to Tony Stark. I didn't feel that at all, and maybe that's just me. There's a lot of references to him, but the emotional scenes, you saw them all in all the trailers. They showed everything in the trailers except for a couple of Mysterio scenes. That's it. You've seen everything else. Now, there's interesting credit scenes, and I'll tell you before I get to spoiler free, one of the credit scenes negates a very significant event in Endgame. I will just leave it at that. A very significant event is negated for a post-credit scene, and I hope you catch it. Because it might be, you know, to the normies out there, you're probably not even going to think about it. But we'll get that into the spoiler section, which we're very close to. And again, I will give you fair warning. I will be talking about this in detail on a live stream very soon, but I just wanted to cut a video first. And I'm so proud of my son. I've raised my son right to be such a Spider-Man purist and not enjoy this. So he is not happy with the Spider-Man, MCU Spider-Man. So X-Men fans, watch out. They've done a great job with established characters, but remember, Disney inherited the MCU. They didn't start it. So the characters they inherited, they cultivated and did good things with, but the newer stuff, I'm not so sure about. Now, it's not woke, so let's be thankful for that. Even with Zenyatta Bandata, who did a better job again, but it's not. So thank you. It's just a superhero movie that you can take your kids to, take the whole family to. You can enjoy, but do not pay full price for this. And let me know what you think. You might love it. Again, I don't hate it. I just didn't think it's the greatest thing ever. I hear people talking favorite Spider-Man film. I just want you, maybe if you have the time, go back and check out Colliders and everybody's review right after a Marvel film. It's always the best one. There's a thing called prisoner of the moment, and we want to try not to be. You want to think about things like, how am I going to like this in 10 years? I'm not going to think about this movie in 10 years, but maybe that's the whole point. You know, you go to a summer film to just eat some popcorn, have fun, and forget about it. But I think, you know, with Spider-Man, by the way, this is the last MCU Spider-Man film. There is no deal with Sony. I'm sure they're negotiating and things are going on behind the scenes, but that was it until we hear something else. So that'll be interesting. And there, you know, there's deep ties to the MCU. So they'd be idiotic to not, have another deal with Disney, but Tom Rothman is in charge of Sony and Amy Pascal is involved. So anything is possible. All right, we're going to get into the spoiler section. So here we go. And it is now the next day. So I've had time to reflect on the film, and I'm going to do this with all of my reviews, but I kept the same shirt on for continuity's sake. And that's something that the MCU is not really that worried about. And that's what we have to talk about first, is the 5-year gap from Endgame. It's dealt with in this film. It's dealt with as a gag when everybody returns. It's called the blip, and most everybody we follow in the film was snapped away by Thanos and brought back in the blip, and that's pretty much it. They have one character who's 5 years older that is kind of a running gag throughout the film, and I think beyond this, that's about as much as they're going to deal with it, which is going to be a huge problem for the MCU in the future. But I don't know if Sony's hands were tied by Marvel of how much they could talk about, how much they could change, and that is the other problem with this film. Now, like I said, Quentin Beck was played very well by Jake Gyllenhaal, and they got the spirit of Mysterio, but not his true origins. It turns out he used to work for Tony Stark. He developed the barf technology, and he gathered a bunch of disgruntled Stark employees together to create the superhero of Mysterio. And it sounds like Glassdoor, the villain. And that's where we get to the other problem. They set up the multiverse in all the trailers, and it turns out it was just a big lie by Quentin Beck, which we could have expected because that's kind of what the Mysterio character does in the comic books and the video games, if you're familiar with them in the video games. But that's going to be a giant letdown to the normies. I kind of figured that would happen, and they might introduce it some other time, but to introduce something like that in the trailers and then not deliver and it be kind of a con, I think, again, we're going to be thinking of Iron Man 3, and I don't think people are going to like that very much. Now, the other problems with this are Spider-Man's identity. Of course, MJ, and she's referred to as MJ throughout this entire film, #NotMyMJ, figures out that he's Spider-Man. And by the end of the film, because of one of the end credit scenes, everybody knows he's Spider-Man, and that is the biggest problem with the Raimi films and Amazing Spider-Man, and now Marvel's doing it too. Everybody knows who Spider-Man is. So one of the end credit scenes has J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson playing an Alex Jones type, which was cool as hell, but he announces that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and that, again, right after you do the 5-year gap, right after you psych everybody out with the multiverse, everybody knows who Spider-Man is now, and that is going to be a big problem going forward with all the storytelling. I mean, are they going to mention it in future MCU films? I mean, you think another hero would go, oh crap, everybody knows Peter is Spider-Man now. We'll see, or if they're going to deal with it as a gag and just kind of move past it like they did with the 5-year gap. Now, the other end credit scene is we find out that Maria Hill and Nick Fury are Skrulls, and they're not just any Skrulls, they're Talos. Well, didn't Captain Marvel spend all her time away in Endgame trying to find Talos and his family a home, and that's part of the reason she was gone? What the hell are they doing back on Earth? So that negates the entire reason why she should have been gone in Endgame. So again, they're not really thinking too much about continuity. Now, I'm glad they did it, and she wasn't in the film that much, don't get me wrong, but still, if this is how we're going to deal with continuity, then you should have introduced the multiverse, because it could give you an out. So, the other thing is they dealt with the memorial for Cap and Iron Man as a bit of a gag because they did it as school news, so they showed it as like really cheesy and unprofessional, and that really didn't land with me, as a lot of the gags didn't land with me. It didn't feel like an epilogue to Phase 3. It felt like kind of a joke, and that's what this movie is. It's not really a joke. It's Spider-Man for normies. So the normies are going to love this. They're not going to think too hard about it, but us comic book fans are. And again, you're not getting the real Spider-Man. This is Spider-Man far from Spider-Man, and that's what I'm going to title this video. You're getting the widget MCU basic version, which is nothing like the character that lasted for decades in the comics, and that's why this character is not going to last, because you really are barely capturing the spirit of Peter Parker. Tom Holland does an okay job, but now that I've seen him in a few movies, I don't think he's that right for Spider-Man. I know a lot of people will disagree. I mean, he's a good Spider-Boy, but he's not a very good Spider-Man. So there were some good things. They did a nod to Marvel Zombies in one of the Mysterio battle scenes, and they did an Iron Man Marvel Zombie, which was very cool. But then they also foreshadowed a Gwen Stacy type of death for MJ, #NotMyMJ, which again bothered me, but nothing had any impact because, like in the film, nothing was real. They were just fighting drones and barf technology. They weren't really fighting the Elementals or Hydro Man or Sandman and Molten Man. And you wasted some good Spider-Man villains. They might bring them back later. We'll see. So, again, if you don't think about it that much, it's an enjoyable film. It's an improvement on Homecoming, which I thoroughly dislike. I like the film more than Nerdrotic Jr. did. But in the end, it was just forgettable. It's just forgettable. And again, I was in a very empty theater, although I still think it's going to be a major hit. I just thought that was very curious. So tell me what you think. Everybody have a great day. Please go to nerdrotic.com for my live stream schedule. See you next time, and may the free folks sing songs of your greatness.
Nerdrotic.com. Please subscribe.